everyone, welcome back to another video. My name is Jill and today I'm going to be doing my September reading wrap-up, so let's just get into it. During the month of September I ended up reading a total of 9 books. I'm actually going to mention 10 in this video because I finished a book like on October 1st, but it's just a book for school, so I'm going to mention it at the end. And also at the end of this video I'm going to talk about what I'm recently reading in case you guys are interested in that. I normally do my reading wrap-ups in chronological order, like I start with like the books that I read at the beginning of the month and then move towards the books that I read at the end of the month, but since I normally talk a lot in my wrap-ups, I feel like people don't like watch them all the way through, which is totally fine. Like I do that too. So I decided that for this video I'm going to try out starting out with my 5-star reads and then going down to my lower rating reads, if that makes sense. Just so that I get to gush with all of you guys about the books that I really loved instead of spending like the first part of my video talking about books that I didn't really like. But if you want to see the books that I didn't really like, stay tuned until the end. I also always list all of the books in my description box in the order that I mentioned them, and so if you want to look down there and see the books that I talk about and maybe like fast forward to a certain part, go for it. Let me know if you guys like this method. I think that it's going to make me feel better because sometimes like at the end of the month I read an amazing book and then I feel like no one gets to see me talk about it. Anyway, I'm not going to talk about too much. So that, yeah, let's just get into all of the books that I gave 5 stars, which is actually quite a lot. I had a really great reading month. I read some like my favorite books of the year. September was overall a really good month, so let's get into those. The first book I want to talk about today is The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. Obviously, this book I gave 5 out of 5 stars. All the rumors about this book are absolutely true. I have been hearing so many people say that this book feels like the warmest hug and that is the sweetest book and that'll put a smile on your face and just instantly make you happy, and all of those rumors are absolutely true. Like, I wasn't sure. I was just like, is it going to be that great? It's that great. Like, it is the most wonderful story. If you haven't heard, this book follows a guy named Linus Baker, and he is a caseworker of sorts for orphanages, house magical children, and so he like goes around to the different orphanages and sees whether they're being taken care of in the best way and determines whether the orphanage should stay open or not, until he gets assigned this super special assignment to go to this highly classified orphanage that contains actually these more dangerous kids. And to see what all of that is about. So he goes there for a month and the story takes off from there. This orphanage, some of the kids include a giant green blob, a garden gnome, and also like the Antichrist, and I'll only mention like a couple because I actually liked going through the book and discovering all of the different children and what their abilities are. But that just gives you a little taste of like what we're dealing with here, and it seems like it would be weird and like it wouldn't work, but it's weird and it absolutely works, if that makes sense. I absolutely loved Linus and Arthur's relationship. I loved Linus's relationship with the children, Arthur's relationship with the children. If I did mention, Arthur is the person who runs this classified orphanage. This book was just so special and I hope that everyone reads it because it was truly like such a gift and it was exactly what I needed at the time that I read it. So yeah, highly recommend this one. It was just the happiest, warmest thing. Next up, another book that I gave a 5 out of 5 stars, and I think that this has, I know this has definitely made my favorite books of the year list, and that is Felix Ever After by Kacen Callendar. This book was so wonderful. I had heard so many people talking about how great this book was, and I was a little cautious going into it, but it was amazing. This basically follows a trans, black, and queer boy named Felix Love, and he is going to this art program at his kind of prestigious high school over the summer, and one day he goes in to take his class, and someone has found pictures of him pre-transition, and also they use their dead name, and they display all this stuff in like the lobby of the school, and Felix is very, very upset by this because this is a huge violation of privacy and it makes him feel like absolutely horrible, and so he vows that he's going to get revenge on the person who did this and like ruin their life, and the story kind of takes off from there. And like that sounds like it's kind of dark and heavy, which it is in certain times, like Felix trying to navigate himself and figure out who he is, did deal with some heavy stuff, but overall I thought this book was so hilarious and heartwarming, and I really did have a smile on my face for the majority of this book. I thought the banter was incredible, and like I said from like the summary, when he wants to get revenge, that kind of quickly changes into like this is kind of ends up being a love story, and there is a love triangle within this book, and I'm hesitant to say that because I know that people are going to be like, oh, I don't want to read it, but I personally thought that the love triangle was really well done, and I think that it made sense given like the context of everything. So please don't let that hinder you from reading this book, and it deserves to be read, and this story deserves to be told, and I just it's so good. Also, besides Felix being trans, queer, and black, there's also a lot of the side characters all have different sexualities. Like, the representation in this book is just, there's so many different things that are being represented, and it was so great to see. Anyway, yes, so I just really love Felix's character development. Overall, I just thought it was a wonderful story. It made me so happy, and it made me want to cheer for the characters towards the end. Yeah, I highly recommend this book. It is definitely on my favorites of the year list. The next book that I read was actually an audiobook, and that was Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This is the second Taylor Jenkins Reid book that I read. Of course, I read the 700 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo earlier this year and absolutely loved it. And so I saved this one at my library on audio, where I put it on hold. And it finally came in after like 6 months of waiting. And when it came available, I wasn't like super into it. I was like, oh, I don't know if I want to listen to this right now. But it ended up being such a good decision for me to listen to it at that point. I haven't heard, this book follows like a 1970s rock band, and it's the love, sex, drugs, rock and roll, all that stuff that normally comes with like the 60s and 70s rock and roll atmosphere. And I really have to like put a disclaimer and say that that normally is not something that interests me. Like, I didn't grow up with rock music. I didn't really hear it as a kid. I really didn't know if I was going to like this because I was like, oh, these topics really don't interest me. It's not really my thing. But I think the fact that I was still able to really enjoy this book shows like how well written it was, because it truly captured my heart, it captured my attention, and it made me want to keep reading. These characters felt like absolutely so real to me. I don't think I mentioned this at the beginning, but it follows like an interview of one of the most popular bands in the 1970s, and they're looking back on their career and like what made them break up, what went wrong. And I will say the audiobook is a full cast audiobook, so it was absolutely brilliant. Like, each person had a different actor and is told in like this interviewing format, and I definitely think that I would not have enjoyed it if I didn't listen to it on audiobook. And I feel like that's a common opinion. Like, if you're going to listen to an audiobook, listen to this audiobook. I've also heard that reading it like physically also has its benefits, but I personally think the audiobook is the way to go, especially for your first reading. Anyway, I just loved Daisy, and I loved Billy, and I loved all the characters. They were just so complex, and sorry, my cat just like knocked over this thing and it hit my tripod. I'm so sorry. So yeah, I feel like it's really hard for me to describe why I like this book. I feel like you just have to like experience it for yourself, because again, the topics still, like, even after reading this book, don't absolutely interest me, but it's just the characters themselves were so full of life. And I literally Googled multiple times to see whether this was an actual band, because I was like, there's no way that they aren't real. There's no way this isn't like a memoir thing. Like, there's no way. But no, it's a totally fictional band, but the way that Taylor Jenkins Reid is able to like capture these different stories is just absolutely amazing, and I think her storytelling is stellar. And I know it's not for everyone, like some people might not like it, but I personally just fell in love. And the last book I have in my 5 out of 5 stars category, and this is actually a book that I gave 4.75 stars, but that is A Very Large Expanse of Sea by Tahereh Mafi. I also listened to this book on audiobook, and this is actually the first book that I read during the month of September. This follows a Muslim teenage girl in the year 2002, which is the year after 9/11. If you're in America, that is when the terrorist attack hit the Twin Towers. We all know this. And so 2002 is not a fun time for the Muslim community in America. There's a lot of bigotry and hate being spewed towards the Muslim community in America during this time. You get to see this teenage girl named Shirin have to sort of navigate that at her predominantly white like high school. And I really enjoyed it. I will say Tahereh Mafi said that this is sort of based off of her own experience and her own life. I've also seen some Muslim reviewers saying that the Muslim rep isn't absolutely perfect, and so just know that going in. Maybe look up some reviews on Goodreads if you're curious. But this book was hard to read at times just because the amount of hate you know, being spewed towards Shirin and her family. That's not all that the book is about. It's also just about Shirin's like day-to-day life, and she also gets into breakdancing with her brother. I just thought that was so cool to see a Muslim girl who wears a hijab breakdancing, like the early 2000s breakdancing. Like, I see breakdancers and I'm like, I don't understand how people do that, but it was just so cool seeing her love breakdancing so much and like go to breakdancing competition. And also Shirin ends up meeting, there's a boy named Ocean who is just the sweetest cinnamon roll, the sweetest sweetie pie, but of course Ocean is a white guy, and so when he starts maybe considering having a relationship with Shirin, there's a bunch of stuff that happens towards both of them that is really, again, nasty and sad. But overall, I thought that the character development for Shirin was absolutely stellar. Shirin starts off the book as a very like angry individual, like totally understandably angry, but she sort of has to confront that throughout the book, and I just thought that her character development was really well done. The only reason why I wasn't a 5 out of 5 stars, and this could be like just a me thing or me getting used to the audiobook, the beginning of the novel I didn't really like the humor. I thought it was a bit awkward and cringeworthy, the humor, but again, it could be just the way that the audiobook was being delivered, but I got used to Shirin's voice as it went on, and then I ended up thinking that it was actually really hilarious. It really has stuck with me even though I read it like over 30 days ago now. Like, I still think about it like every single day. So yeah, this one was really good. Alright, next up we have a book that I gave 4 stars, I think. And that is Blood and Honey by Shelby Mahurin. This is the sequel to Serpent and Dove, which I read earlier this year, and I really enjoyed Serpent and Dove when I read it. It was really popular on BookTube when it came out, but I wasn't really on BookTube when it came out, so I read it earlier this year. I listened to it on audiobook, and again, I really enjoyed it, even though like after I read it I realized there were some problematic elements to it. I was still really excited to read the sequel, and it came available on audiobook, and I was like, this is perfect, plus the cover is gorgeous. Anyway, so I read this book. To this day, like, I finished it like a week ago, and to this day I don't know what I want to rate it. Like, I sincerely don't know, because there's some days where I'm like it's a 3-star, some days when I'm like it's a 5-star. I don't know what I want to rate it. I've never had this happen to me. I will say this book picks up right where Serpent and Dove leaves off, and so I won't really talk about like the specific plot of Blood and Honey, obviously for spoiler reasons, but Serpent and Dove, you follow like a witch and then like a witch hunter, and all kinds of stuff happens with that. I'm sure most of you know what Serpent and Dove is about. Yeah, this sequel definitely expands the world. Like, we get different magical creatures. Like, it really blows the world up. The only thing, and again, this is the reason why I can't decide my rating, is because I can't decide whether the characters were acting out of character or whether that's just part of their greater like character development. Acting in weird ways that make me really annoying, and like especially the 2 main characters, Reed and Lou, they like repetitively like pick fights with one another for like the same reasons, and like it just felt like really out of character, and I thought a lot of characters were acting differently than they did in the first book, because this book really does delve into Lou and Reed's like darker natures and their darker, like, they really have to face their flaws. And so I know I'm being very confusing, but I just don't know how I feel. I'll probably read the last one because I'm interested to see where it's going to go. Again, absolutely no spoilers, but I don't know how they're going to make the 3rd book different than the previous 2. And again, this was originally supposed to be a duology, and this book kind of suffers from that 2nd book syndrome, and I kind of feel that a little bit because I don't know how they're going to make a 3rd book. Anyway, so I'm sticking with 4 stars right now because it was entertaining, but I can't tell how much I liked it, if that makes sense. Anyway, I'm just gonna move on. Alright, moving on to my 3-star reads. The first one is a book that I read for my young adult literature class, and that is If I Ever Get Out of Here by Eric Gansworth. This I gave 3 out of 5 stars just because it just personally wasn't for me. It didn't appeal to me in a lot of different ways. It follows this 8th grade boy, so he's about like 13, 14, and it's his coming of age story. He's also an American Indian, and he lives on a reservation, and he goes to a predominantly like white high school, and he's like in a white section of his high school, and it also takes place during the 1970s, and so the racism is quite a lot that he has to deal with. Yeah, I really enjoyed the discussions that I had on this book. Probably wouldn't have enjoyed it even like a 3-star rating if I hadn't like discussed it, but I do think there are lots of great discussions in this book. This also deals with, like, again, like I mentioned with Daisy Jones and the Six, it deals a lot with like rock and roll, like the Beatles and Paul McCartney and stuff like that, and I just like have no connection to that. But overall, this is a great story. It just personally wasn't like my absolute favorite, but I definitely recommend it if like what I've talked about appeals to you, or if you want to get maybe a different perspective. Next up, I read a very exciting book, and that was The Dutchess Deal by Tessa. This is my first historical romance that I've ever read, and I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. I enjoyed it much more than I thought I would. I like fully admit I was one of those people in my youth that walked past like the historical romance section with all the guys with like the abs on the cover and thought, oh my god, those books must be so bad, you know, just me and my young ignorant self just judging so hard. And so I never thought that I would read a historical romance. So glad that I did, because I honestly did have so much fun with this book, like way more fun than I thought I would. It follows a girl named Emma and the Duke of Ashbury, and the Duke of Ashbury has like a big like scar on his face, and so no one really wants to marry him, and so he ends up convincing Emma to marry him like as a marriage of convenience. And she's like a seamstress girl, and so he can like raise her status, and then like all she has to do is give him a son, and then they'll just live their separate lives. And obviously that doesn't happen. This is just like in the middle for me, because there were lots of times where I just could not take it seriously. I thought that it was too cringy, and I was just rolling my eyes at some parts. But overall, I thought that it was a lot of fun, and I'll definitely be picking up more historicals in the future. And please let me know if you have any recommendations, because I feel like historical romance is such a huge genre and I don't really know what else to read. But yeah, it was a fun time. Okay, now on to the only book that I gave 2 stars. Unfortunately, this is gonna make some people so sad, but that was the Unhoneymooners by Christina Lauren. I heard so many people say that this was their favorite Christina Lauren book, some of their favorite like hate to love romance book, and I did not like it. I'm beginning to realize that hate to love is not my absolute favorite, especially when it's based on like a miscommunication. It's about a girl named Olive and her twin sister, identical twin sister, just got married, but then like a disaster happens at the wedding, and so the twin sister makes Olive and the groom's brother Ethan go on their honeymoon together to a like lavish like 10-day vacation in Hawaii, and Ethan and Olive hate each other, and so they're like, oh, we hate each other, but we gotta go to Hawaii. I didn't click a lot with 2 main characters. Like, I didn't love them too much. I thought the banter was pretty funny, but I just didn't think like they had the best character development together. I don't know, that's just me probably. But then the thing, I was like writing at maybe a 3 stars, but then the thing that happens at the end happens, and I won't say what it is, but I just was so mad. I ranted to people about that, because like that's like what happens to Olive was like not okay. And if you've read it, you might know what I'm alluding to, but I just could not think that like the story was romantic after that point. It's just my opinion. So yeah, unfortunately I feel like I'm in the very big minority for this one, but I just didn't like it. Alright, and then the last 2 books that I read this month, I didn't give any rating because they were just books that I read for school. The first one that I did actually finish during the month of September is Maul Flanders by Daniel Defore. I'm not going to talk about this very much. It's about this woman who is like this thief, and I actually enjoyed it more than I thought I would, because like she's kind of a badass. And the second book that I read for that class, this is the one that I finished on October 1st, but I'm just going to talk about it now because I don't want to talk about it in October, and that is Pamela by Samuel Richardson. This book made me nauseous. This is like about this 15-year-old servant girl who her like master ends up wanting to have sex with her and like kidnaps her. Pamela's like, no, you're not allowed to do that, and then he ends up marrying her anyway. It's very awkward and very gross. Alright, now to get into all the books that I'm currently reading, and I'm not going to really go very in-depth with my thoughts on these, just because I'll talk about them in my October wrap-up. The first one that I'm reading is Raybearer by Jordan Ifueko, and this book is absolutely fantastic. I am almost done with it. I'm on page 271, and so about right there, and I already know it's going to be 5 stars. Absolutely amazing African-inspired fantasy. We love to see it. For my YA class, I am reading It's Kind of a Funny Story by Ned Vizzini, and I've seen this around like for a while, and I'm finally getting to read it. Still have like quite a bit to go, but I will finish this in October, and this is all about mental health and suicide. Final book that I am reading right now is what I'm listening to on audiobook, and that is Grown by Tiffany D. Jackson. This is also a gross book to read. It deals with this girl who wants to be a singer, and she ends up meeting this much older guy, and it's based off of the R. Kelly case. There's lots of trigger warning for sexual abuse, rape, sexual assault, murder, lots of stuff. This book is very heavy. I'm only about like 15% of the way through. It's just, it makes me sick to my stomach to listen to it, but you know, it's just the nature of the content. Alright, so that was my September wrap up and my current reads. I hope you guys all enjoyed this video. Please let me know your favorite book that you read in September down in the comments below. Let me know if you've read any books that I read, what you thought of them, if you disagree with me, all the good stuff. Give this video a like if you enjoyed it, and subscribe if you're new here and want to see more videos from me. And yeah, I will see you guys later in another video very soon. Bye!